all the nerds, myself included, are going to be very happy with this upcoming segment. We're going to talk about polls, and more specifically, we're going to talk about polls critical of conservative policy. I spend a decent amount of time shitting on conservatism and conservatism and Republican agenda overall. I do it for fun, but I also understand that conservative policy is largely unpopular. Every time a poll comes out, it shows that. Every time a poll comes out regarding progressive policy, it polls overwhelmingly popularly. Whenever there is a down ballot measure in a conservative state with a progressive agenda, those ballot measures pass with like 60 to 70% of the vote. We've seen this in Florida. We saw this in 2024 with Missouri when it came to raising the minimum wage and implementing paid family leave. Americans do not like conservative policy because conservative policy is damaging. The whole idea of conservatism is to preserve the status quo. And the status quo in a hyper-capitalist country like the United States is the continued exploitation of the working class and the continued marginalization of minority communities. The first poll we're going to talk about is courtesy of YouGov and The Economist. Percentage of people who approve and disapprove of Trump's job performance so far. U.S. citizens, overall, 41% strongly approve compared to 54% that don't approve. This is obviously the highest among Republicans. Republicans, 87% of the job that Donald Trump is doing. This, of course, includes MAGA Republicans, which I'm sure inflate that slightly, but it's also because, like, conservatives are, like, yeah. Yeah. You ultimately, you know where I'm going with this. But what's really interesting about this is 60% of independents disapprove of Donald Trump. If you are the president of the United States, you cannot win an election on your party alone. You have to be able to win not only your party, but the moderates in your party, and also a lion's share of independents. This is why typically conservatives perform wetter. Wow. This is why typically Republican presidential candidates perform better in elections with lower turnout than they do when there's higher turnout. We saw it in the last two election cycles. 2020 had extraordinary turnout as far as voter participation goes in the United States, and Donald Trump lost by millions of votes. 2024 had less of a turnout, and Donald Trump won with a plurality, not a majority. This also factors into Democrats having to be better at compelling people to come out and vote, which Kamala Harris was definitely not. But let's dive a little bit deeper into this. Age groups. 27% of 18 to 29-year-olds strongly agree with Donald Trump's performance as president. 66% disagree. This is the age group that helped Donald Trump win. And I mean this with nothing but the utmost respect. This highlights the naivete of young people. First-time voters, second-time voters, they might not have really understood what happened with Trump and his policy record in his first term, and they thought that, Trump was funny and Trump's a good tweeter, and he, maybe he'll make my life a little bit better. I did a whole segment on this a couple months ago. He's not going to make your life better. In fact, he's going to make your life fucking shittier, because ultimately, at the end of the day, conservative, Democrat, Republican, doesn't fucking matter. They serve the system, and the system is still capitalism. Among boomers, 65 plus, only 46% approve. There are more boomers that disagree with President Trump, that disagree with his performance, or then approve of it, disapprove, I should say. Men, yes, men. 48% of men disapprove of Donald Trump compared to 45%. Women obviously is going to be higher. Women were always disapproving of Donald Trump. White people, yes, you, my fellow whites, the whites are actually in the right here, kind of. 48% both approve and disapprove, with 6% being not sure. If you are one of those 6% of white people, what the fuck are you doing? But now, like, okay, it's closing the gap. The perception of Trump is changing. It only took 8 fucking years, but people are finally waking up. Black people, 76% disapprove. That does not surprise me. 60% of Hispanics disapprove. That does not surprise me. Remember, Trump gained considerably with these two groups in the election. And now, at least the Hispanic population is realizing, Donald Trump might not have been the appropriate vote, with this whole, with his mass deportation operation. Approval and disapproval of Trump's job performance. 54% strongly or somewhat disapprove at the time of this poll. This is up from like 42%. There has been a like double-digit increase in Trump's disapproval. Net job approval among U.S. adult citizens in Trump's first term, Biden's term, and Trump's second term. Trump is way underwater. He is on track to be significantly more unpopular than Joe Biden is. Just for context, as you can see from this chart, Joe Biden didn't begin to reach this. He is outpacing Joe Biden on this pace. I don't know what the first, second, third, and fourth means. I'm guessing, this is probably years of this. Okay, this is years of their presidency. Joe Biden was not universally despised until halfway through his second year as president, which definitely tracks. That was when shit really fell off the rails. He stopped doing, any sort of populism, and he started to tighten up that grip on Netanyahu's cock and balls. Net approval, again, from the president's party in Trump's first term, yada, yada. They don't really give a shit about party approval already. I'm just being honest. Approval of Donald Trump's handling on key issues. Donald Trump is underwater in all of these. -1% on crime, -8% on immigration, -12 on jobs in the economy, -14 on abortion, and -22 on inflation. All of these, with the exception of abortion, started in the positives, like anywhere from +6 to +12. There are massive swings across the board because Donald Trump does not have a plan to make your life better. It's that simple. Going to war with Iran will not lower grocery prices. Continuing to arm Israel so they can do a genocide in Gaza will not get you better health care. Net approval of Donald Trump's handling of the economy in his first term and his second term. He is currently -12. At no point was he below -5 in his first term. Republicans, the perception of them is that they're better on the economy than Democrats are, which I don't know how that propaganda has stuck, because every Republican president increases the national debt. They have a net outsourcing of jobs, or they have a negative net outsourcing of jobs. They just do not bolster the economy to the same degree that their propaganda would allow you to realize. -12, and we are not even halfway through his first year as president. It's going to be, I don't know what it's going to be. I literally have no idea. Like, how much more can he push the American people? He will always have his base, I understand that, but the rest of the country is very clearly not fucking with this. Like, when does the pressure when does he begin to feel the pressure? Is it when the Republican representatives get their ass whooped too much at their town halls and they slowly begin to shift away from Donald Trump? Because that's really what's keeping him like insulated in the White House, is that he has so many dick riders that it almost doesn't fucking matter how the people feel, because all of the people in Congress and in the White House, they love him, which is wrong. Like, if you're an elected representative, you work at the behest of your constituents, not at, the fucking, you don't suck off the president. Do you approve or disapprove of the way Donald Trump is handling these specific issues? Immigration, percent of US adult citizens who strongly so this is about on par with his first term. Approval of Donald Trump among Americans who lean Republican, Democrat, and toward neither party. Of course, the Republicans are fucking glazing, plus 74, but independents are slowly but surely leaving Donald Trump. He's at minus 30 with independents and minus 88 with Democrats. That is not sustainable. Approval of gender of Donald Trump's second term. Men. Donald Trump has a negative favorability amongst men. I cannot believe what I'm seeing. Obviously, he's going to have a negative approval amongst women. He's a fucking rapist. He was friends with Jeffrey Epstein. He's a misogynist. But men are coming around and finally hating on Donald Trump. Approval of Donald Trump's second term job performance among adult citizens, including white, black, and Hispanic Americans, underwater for almost all of them, except for white people. He's about even with white people. Remember, it was 48-48 amongst the whites. Approval by age. This, like, this is the craziest thing to me. Two things stand out. Boomers have consistently been right about Donald Trump. Holy fuck. This is my grandest takeaway from this, is that maybe boomers aren't the problem. Maybe we've been too hard on boomers, and it's time that we really start making fun of Generation X or Generation Y, whatever is. I guess it would be Generation X, the generation that came after boomers, because they are still about even on Donald Trump, even though support amongst all the other age groups is tracking down, especially amongst 18 to 29-year-olds, which again tracks back to Donald Trump not improving their conditions in any way, and they're the generation that objectively has it the shittiest. That is the end of that poll. Now, I have another poll. And listen, shut the fuck up if you're going to be like, oh, well, polls aren't exactly reliable. Shut the fuck up, all right? Listen, I understand that polls are flawed, okay? But when you have multiple pollsters coming out and saying the same thing, even if they're wrong, they're not going to be wrong to a degree that flips the poll, right? YouGov and The Economist may be a little bit off on the disapproval of Donald Trump amongst 18 to 29-year-olds. But maybe instead of it being like negative 18, it's like negative 10, right? There's not just going to be overwhelming positivity for him. These polls focus specifically on the big, beautiful bill and how the majority of Americans actually don't fuck with it. Like, they don't fuck with Medicaid being stripped away. They don't fuck with SNAP being stripped away. A majority of Americans have an unfavorable view of President Trump's sweeping tax policy, according to a new poll from nonpartisan health research group KFF. The bill would extend Trump's 2017 tax cuts, implement new tax cuts for tips and overtime, pour billions into the administration's deportation plans, and make cuts to Medicaid and food stamps. It is expected to be the biggest legislative accomplishment of Trump's second term if the Republican-led Congress can find the votes to pass it through both chambers and send it to the president's desk for signature into law. But 64% of Americans have an unfavorable view of the proposed bill, which passed in May and is currently being tweaked in the Senate, according to the survey by the Kaiser Family Foundation of 1,321 people across the country. What's fascinating about this poll, this is the poll that separated the Republicans into MAGA and non-MAGA. This poll was quite extensive. I found an article summarizing the poll instead of just reading it directly from the site because there was a lot. It was very in-depth. It compared people's awareness of certain issues and whether or not they approved and whether the approval was dictated if they were aware of something or not, which I found to be really fascinating because the media has done a piss-ass job in actually explaining to people why this is bad. It's bad because Medicaid and SNAP are getting cut, but it's also bad because of the details that are hidden within it. Like no tax on tips, there's a threshold for, and I forget what the threshold is. I think it's like $26,000 or something. It's really not that much. The work requirements for Medicaid, the fact that most people on Medicaid are already employed. Like I've said this from my own personal experience. When I was on Medicaid, I was employed but I was on Medicaid because I couldn't get health care from my employer because I didn't qualify for health care from my employer. This skews heavily along partisan lines. The vast majority of Democrats, 87%, and independents have an unfavorable opinion of the bill, while 61% of Republicans have a favorable opinion of it. Of course they fucking do. But the reason why there is still such a cavernous gap is because of the independents. The independents showed up. The free thinkers and the enlightened centrists are recognizing that Trump is horrible. Among Republicans, support for the bill is further divided between people who identify as supporters of Trump's MAGA movement. 2/3 of non-MAGA Republicans have an unfavorable view, while 72% of MAGA Republicans had a favorable view. I'd say MAGA is probably half of the Republican Party. It's probably like comfortably 20 to 30 million people. But even this shows that MAGA is a fucking cult. 2/3 of non-MAGA Republicans had an unfavorable view. Nearly 3/4 of MAGA Republicans had a favorable. A non-MAGA Republican, think somebody like, oh God, Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney is a non-MAGA Republican. You probably have a bunch of non-MAGA Republicans in your family. They're the kinds of people who are like, I'm socially liberal but fiscally conservative. They're the kinds of people who don't they don't hate they don't hate gay people, they don't hate trans people. They're like agnostic to them. It's very much like, do whatever you want. I'm not interested. That doesn't concern me, but live your life. This is also why the gap is so cavernous, is because non-MAGA Republicans aren't fucking blinded by their admiration for Donald Trump. They at least recognize that there are provisions in this bill that will harm them and their communities. The survey polled people about the bill in early June when the only available version was the one that passed the House in May. This is objectively the worst version. The Senate, because of guys like Ron Paul, because of guys I'm thinking of Rand Paul and Ron Johnson, pardon me. Because of folks like them, there are going to be serious tweaks made throughout the bill. And there are even some House Republicans like Marjorie Taylor Greene who's like, if I were able to read, I would have vetoed this bill because there are provisions that I disagree with. That version of the package would boost defense and immigration enforcement spending, implement more than $2 trillion in income tax breaks, expand the child tax credit, and raise the debt ceiling. It would also implement new restrictions on food stamps and Medicaid, including implementing new work requirements for able-bodied adults without children that would save at least $625 billion and cause 7.6 Americans to lose health care over the next 10 years, according to the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office. Fun fact about work requirements is they don't fucking do anything because a majority of people on Medicaid are already working. It's just more ways to kick people off of Medicaid. The Senate released their own version of the bill on June 16th, which would make deeper cuts to Medicaid and create more limited versions of Trump's tax cuts on tips and overtime in an effort to lower the package's price tag and fund business tax breaks. Let me just clear something here. I'm not applauding Republicans in the Senate for being against this bill because they're against it for all of the wrong reasons. They're against it because there's too much spending, but they're looking to make cuts to further social services. Like, they're not looking to increase revenue generation in any way. It is all merely by way of cutting expenditures. The KFF survey also found that around 2/3 of Americans support Medicaid work requirements, including across both parties. A little more than 50% of Democrats support work requirements for adults on Medicaid, while 66% of independents and 88% of Republicans support the proposal. This is, again, without them saying that the majority of people are already working, and that work requirements effectively don't fucking do anything. Another poll from WAPO and Ipsos released on June 17th found that 42% of Americans opposed the House-passed tax bill, while 23% of Americans support it. That is staggeringly low. Oh my God. Around 1/3% of Americans say they have no opinion on the package. 23% approval is fucking bonkers. Like the KFF poll, the Post found support and opposition for the bill fell along party lines, yada yada. Okay, let me go over to the poll actually. See if I can find what I was talking about. Here we go. I fucking found it. A majority of the public, 68%, including 9 in 10 Republicans and MAGA supporters, as well as half of Democrats, support Medicaid work requirements described in the House bill. Yet, most people are not aware that the majority of Medicaid recipients are already working, and attitudes can change once people are provided with additional information. For example, support for Medicaid work requirements drops as low as 35%, a 33-point decrease in support, when proponents hear that most people on Medicaid are already working and that many would be at risk of losing coverage because of difficulty completing paperwork to prove their eligibility. On the other hand, support increases as high as 79%, an 11-point increase, if opponents hear the argument that imposing these requirements could save money and help fund Medicaid for the elderly, people with disabilities, and low-income children, showing how persuasive an argument can be even if it's not factually true. You know what would make Medicaid more effective? If you taxed the fucking wealthy, and you taxed corporations, and you taxed the church. If you generate more revenue, you have more money to spend on social services. It's really not that fucking hard. Additionally, people are like, oh, Medicaid is, they're doing Medicaid fraud at the point of the recipients. Like, no. You have people like Rick Scott and insurance company CEOs defrauding Medicaid. That's where the fraud is.